All Indiana Politics
is your premier source for Indiana politics.
Focusing on issues that matter to you.
I still want us to be the best in the Midwest.
We can't afford another lockdown.
Give the citizens of this country the relief they need.
Education in the state of Indiana remains priority number one.
In-depth, nonpartisan coverage.
We don't know exactly where the economy will be in January.
People are worried with good reason.
Exclusive interviews with Indiana's political leaders.
We have the resources here in the state of Indiana to care for those who are in need.
Expert analysis on critical legislation.
We need to reform those laws.
This recovery is going to take some time.
We've got to anticipate that there'll be a budget shortfall.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
Good Sunday morning. Welcome to another edition of All Indiana Politics. I'm Phil Sanchez. Transportation Secretary and former South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg is ducking questions about a possible vice presidential bid. He's on Vice President Kamala Harris's shortlist for running mates this fall. We expect Harris will announce a running mate any day now. Our government reporter Garrett Bergquist caught up with Buttigieg during a visit to a planned electric vehicle plant in Kokomo.
So it is thrilling and I think a little bit poetic for me to have the privilege of being here now on behalf of President Biden and Vice President Harris and this administration to celebrate the extraordinary work that's going on, the innovation, the job creation, the growth, and the opportunity that is at hand. You know, there's been a lot of talk that came to this region and regions like it over the years, but nobody in my lifetime has followed through from Washington the way that this administration has. And the focus on American manufacturing, American-made products, and American workers has characterized this administration and delivered big results. Under President Biden and Vice President Harris, the U.S. has created nearly 800,000 manufacturing jobs, which is especially impressive when you consider that just under the previous administration, we lost manufacturing jobs and experienced a manufacturing recession. But what I've seen here is not just the volume of manufacturing, but the quality of it, the sophistication and the advancement, which is part of why the skills of our union workers and the skills being cultivated at an institution like Ivy Tech in partnership with our schools is so important. And it's great to see the jobs that are being created even before that facility is fully up and running with the good building trades jobs that are going to get that ready. Those jobs, and then of course the jobs that will be created at the facility itself, aren't just making batteries. They are making livelihoods. They represent presence under the tree. They represent education for kids. They represent cars and trucks in the driveway for so many families in this area. And of course, it's especially exciting to see how Stellantis and Samsung have partnered up right here in Howard County and in Kokomo. This is a unique facility, an extraordinary thing, but there are opportunities and good news announcements like this happening all across the country. And part of that, we believe, is driven by our once-in-a-generation infrastructure improvements, our insistence that companies receiving American taxpayer dollars use products and make products here in America, our multi-billion-dollar investments in the manufacturing of the future. Companies are seeing this, and as they prepare for that EV future, they understand that the best way to capitalize on that future is to invest right here in America. So far, we count 400 new or expanded facilities since the start of this administration, processing materials, manufacturing batteries, and assembling EVs.
Is there anything you can say about your future?
Have you spoken with Vice President Harris?
I'm going to go to Allie first, and then we'll take...
Do you see the completion of I-69 here in Indiana as another component of efforts to bring jobs back to areas like, I mean, obviously Kokomo, we're not on the I-69 corridor itself, but places like this?
Well, you know, certainly part of what goes into supply chains is having efficient roadway connections. Now, we largely defer to the state in terms of what they prioritize, but we keep that federal funding coming. And with our discretionary programs, we're going to do everything we can to help support outcomes like safety and economic wins, climate wins, and equity wins along the way. Well, every single year, more Americans have chosen to buy an EV than the year prior. That's an uninterrupted pattern so far, and I expect it to continue. While 80% of EV charging happens at home, it is true that we need to build out more EV infrastructure. That's exactly what we're doing. The country has roughly doubled its EV publicly available chargers since President Biden took office. We're right in the neighborhood of 180,000. That's been driven by the private sector. We need public funding to deploy public funding to fill in the gaps, areas where it's not yet profitable to put in an EV charger. So we've got a program doing exactly that. Most of those chargers will go in the second half of this decade, and we're confident that we will meet or beat President Biden's goal of having 500,000 chargers in place by the end of the decade. I got into politics because of the fight over whether to save our auto industry, and I'm so glad that the Obama-Biden administration did that, because we've seen the growth that came. It was very personal for me because I saw what happened when you lose those auto factories. That's what happened to my hometown, and it took us 50 years to dig out of that in South Bend. So it's been important, whether it's in a community here with a proud auto manufacturing tradition that goes back to the Haynes-Apperson days, or some of the places that didn't have as much of it in the past. But I've seen factories in DeSoto, Kansas, Glendale, Kentucky under construction, all the way up to close to South Bend, where there's one in the works as well over in New Carlisle. All of that is a great example of what America's manufacturing renaissance looks like. This is without regard to politics. You'll see states red, blue, and purple winning in this new EV economy. But we're not putting a thumb on the scale there. But where we are putting a thumb on the scale is to make sure that EV transition is made in America.
All right, coming up, a candidate for governor floats a property tax plan. How Mike Braun says he wants to cut your tax bill. Welcome back. Republican governor candidate Mike Braun says his property tax plan could save you more than 20% on your bills. His plan would expand the homestead deduction, cap property tax increases at 3% per year, and if you're over age 65 or have low income, the cap would be 2%. Braun explained his plan to our government reporter, Garrett Bergquist.
Tell us about the decision-making process that went into your property tax plan.
So I travel, visit all 92 counties, been doing that every year. I've been a senator. Now you mix your official duties and you're out there campaigning for governor. Probably the theme I've heard nonstop property taxes. And that's because what was working for most Hoosiers didn't work when we went through inflation. And the inflation's been caused by, of course, the federal government's policies, but that still means we get it back home as well. So the 1%, 2%, and 3% caps that were only impacting, you couldn't have bills be any more than that, was done when inflation wasn't an issue. We haven't had inflation this bad. Maybe it's ebbing a little bit, which thank goodness, since back in the late 70s and 80s. But inevitably, we're going to get it, and we'll get it again, especially with the federal government borrowing and spending so much money. So that being said, no one was really putting a template out. This is taking what I've heard needs to be addressed. It puts a good framework for future instances of this, meaning that the bills can't go up any more than the robust growth of what a really moving and shaking economy would be in that 2 to 3% range. It means that local jurisdictions will have to take the assessed values, calculate their tax rates to live within those guidelines.
Your plan specifically calls for a cap of a 2% annual property tax increase for seniors, people on low incomes, and people with children under the age of 18, and 3% for everyone else. Gotcha. Why not simply go for one cap for everybody?
Well, because I think there's a difference there. And I think that we need to acknowledge that local governments, school districts are going to be important. I think it's the most important level of government. It is where so much of the vital services are given. And I think that they've got other options too, but they have to make the case when you're actually asking a taxpayer to go above and beyond on one particular tax, the robust growth of any economy. So that's the general kind of parameter there, and thought it was worth, just like when we set the circuit breakers on 1%, 2%, and 3%, we said there was a difference between homeowners and the willingness to tax a home, because we want people to stay in their home. I'm getting complaints from people that are having to decide, can I afford the property tax on my home? And we made a difference on category 2, agriculture, multifamily housing. And then 3 would be commercial and industrial. So this makes a little difference in terms of what you can do with the first category versus the other 2. And it's there and it should work regardless of where our economy and inflation goes into the future.
Does capping the property tax jeopardize our ability to adjust to changes in economic conditions as reflected in the housing market?
Oh, you still have referenda that you can exercise. This just says that normal course of business, it shouldn't be going up more than the robust growth of the economy. If you want more, look at a local income tax, look at doing a referendum. And if you do a referendum, it'll be with transparency for the taxpayer.
Speaking of referenda, your plan also would require some new requirements for ballot language. Among other things, you'd have to include data on how a referendum would affect your property taxes. What other specific requirements would you like to set up for referendum language?
In general, it's just going to be communication and transparency. I don't like the idea. Most Hoosier taxpayers don't like it, that it, generally they're done in an off-year election. I think the more people that weigh in, the better end results you're going to get. And I'm going to have as a hallmark of my administration input from the public on any issue. And it's going to be easy to give it to us and then flood things with transparency. To me, you do those 2 things, you're listening to the people that you govern, and you're not trying to hide anything behind the scenes.
Now, the General Assembly is already working on its own tax overhaul, including with property taxes. Might your plan end up conflicting with theirs?
Hey, this is to put a bold plan out there, which we normally don't do. And I was a legislator in 15, 16, and 17. Been that out here. I know how complicated it is to take any bill format and get it to the finish line where it's untouched or not changed. That never happens. This is the lead on what I'm hearing by listening to constituents of a great place to start to use it as a template. Sure, you got the reality of dealing with 150 legislators, many of whom I think are going to agree with a large part of this.
Democrats, including your opponent, are arguing that capping those taxes might jeopardize our ability to support services, including public schools. Do they have a point? How would you head off that problem?
I'd say they've got other avenues. If you can't, even for your schools and your local government, why would you ask your residents, your local taxpayers to be doing that above and beyond the high growth of an economy, especially when that economy isn't growing that well? This gives plenty of latitude at caps that are reasonable. And if they want to go above and beyond, they use a referendum or other innovative entrepreneurial ways of raising revenue. It just doesn't let you do it year after year to where you're going above and beyond what the ability of a local property taxpayer has to pay for that. So it makes you maybe find a few other sources, but it doesn't keep you from doing it.
Democrats have called Braun's plan a danger to the state's finances. State Party Chair Mike Schmoll says Hoosiers deserve real relief from rising property taxes, not gimmicks that would balloon local deficits, endanger local services, and suffocate Indiana's housing market. Coming up, Indiana's best political team assesses Buttigieg's chances and new rules for protests on IU campuses. Welcome back to All Indiana Politics as we welcome in 2 members of Indiana's best political team, Republican Allie Bartlett and Democrat Laura Beck. Good to see you both. Let's begin with Buttigieg. Since we last talked, at least one other person on Harris's short list bowed out. That was North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper. Laura, we'll start with you this week. Does this improve Buttigieg's chances?
Well, I think he's got a great chance, frankly. I mean, he is truly one of, I think, the best messengers in our party right now. I also think he's got great experience. I think he has a real heart for public service, and he's also really spent some time digging in, as you can listen to him, as the Department of Transportation Secretary. So I think he's got some great qualifications, and I think would be a terrific choice. That said, we have a really deep bench. There are some other names that are floating out there who are some governors, Senator Mark Kelly. So I think we have some really great opportunities here. It's going to be very interesting to see who she picks. And it'll be also interesting to see who is in that head-to-head debate with J.D. Vance. I mean, the thought of Mayor Pete, I still call him Mayor Pete, but the thought of Mayor Pete and J.D. Vance debating is something I think that all of us would enjoy and greatly benefit from.
It would be a good one. Allie, let's talk about the role both geography and voter appeal play here. Could Harris's VP choice make or break her presidential run?
So my response to that is that yes, I think, regardless, I truly believe that Donald Trump is going to be victorious in November. But because of Kamala Harris's weak personal record, I think a lot of her potential comes down to this choice. I think lucky for us, I don't think her campaign is very strategic, and I'm not sure they will make the most logical choice. But I think a lot rides on this for her because she's not very well liked in general. And so she's really going to need to rely on selecting a VP that can help make up for some of that. And, strategically, she's going to need to draw in voters from somewhere. I think that's where some of the appeal of Pete Buttigieg comes in. Obviously, he's a Midwestern guy. I'm a South Bend native myself, so I stick to Mayor Pete as well, Laura. But yeah, I think, like I said, do I think they're going to make the most wise decision? No. Is it important for them to do so objectively from their campaign side? Yes. Do I think it's going to matter either way? Probably not.
All right, we'll see what happens. Laura, I'll let you respond quickly.
Oh, I mean, I think that has to be, I think Allie and anybody who is on the Trump side and Trump team, that has to be the place you're coming from right now, because Democrats have had a pretty solid couple of weeks, especially with the vice president's roll out with the fact that she raised $200 million in a incredibly brief period of time, and the fact that there's so much excitement around it right now. And Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are really flailing because for the first time they're not in the spotlight for the way they want to be. So I think I think with her gaining in the polls, we're going to see that, and I think she's going to get a real bump with the vice president announcement and then heading into the convention.
Okay, we'll see. On Thursday, IU's new campus expression policy took effect, ladies, as you very well know. It bans camping and requires permission 10 days in advance for any temporary structures. It also limits protests to between 6 a.m. and 11 p.m. Allie, would this survive a court challenge?
In my opinion, yes. Obviously, that's not my official legal opinion there as an attorney, but this is not something that's prohibiting people from peacefully protesting. I mean, you're still getting a large majority of the day there to protest. It's not unreasonable to ask people to give advance notice for temporary structures. I mean, there's nothing there that prohibits a protest whatsoever. These are safety measures that have been put in place in response to dangerous, really crazy protests that we've seen out of groups like BLM and people supporting Hamas. It's actually endangered the lives of students and faculty on campus. And for once, as a Boilermaker, I can say that maybe IU is trying to do the right thing. I do believe that this would be upheld in court because, like I said, it does not restrict anyone's right to protest.
Right. Laura, student protesters say this represses free speech. You agree?
Well, I think this just isn't a black or white issue, and I think it can be it's incredibly complicated. And one of the challenges is the way that IU handled it back in the spring, which I think got us to this point. And I think that it is. I agree with Allie. I mean, it is a balance between safety and expression. The challenge becomes a very slippery slope between what is being protested, how it's being protested. And I do think that there will be legal challenges to it. I think that the students there are pretty creative in that regard. But again, going back to it, I think the way that it was all handled back in the spring is really what got us to this place. And I think it's just caused a lot of confusion and frustration among various diverse stakeholder groups.
Yeah, and we'll see if that plays a role at all in the upcoming elections here in November, specifically if that gets asked to the candidates for governor. Ladies, good to see you both. Thank you so much for joining the show. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you. Thank you for joining us for All Indiana Politics this week. We'll, of course, be back here next Sunday morning at 9:30. And be sure to tune in at 11 a.m. for the Hill Sunday with Chris Steyerwalt. Lots going on this week. All eyes will be on who Vice President Kamala Harris will pick as her running mate. All of that and more on WishTV.com. Have a great rest of your weekend.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network. Watch All Indiana Politics live Sunday mornings at 9:30 on Wish TV and at WishTV.com. Subscribe to this podcast and listen weekly here on the All Indiana Podcast Network. And be sure to discover even more great podcasts at AllIndianaPodcastNetwork.com.